Once I started writing at 35, it was so clear that this is what I was made to do. You know, a lot of people talk about, the writer's anguish, and if that is what it is for you, maybe that's not the thing to do.
So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the multi-talented Gill Deacon.
Thank you so much, Carolina. A great pleasure to introduce a writer who is no small environmentalist himself and whose work continues to explore the collisions between human ambition and the natural world. John Valiant's writing has appeared in The New Yorker, The Atlantic, National Geographic, Outside Magazine. He came to our attention, came on with a force, with his book, The Golden Spruce, the story of logger turned activist Grant Hadwin, who plunged, if you haven't read that book, plunged naked into a river in British Columbia's Queen Charlotte Islands, towing a chainsaw. When his night's work was done, a unique Sitka spruce, 165 feet tall and covered with luminous golden needles, teetered on its stump. He followed that up with The Tiger, which is the true story of a man-eating Siberian tiger who is on the prowl outside a remote village in Russia's far east. Unforgettable sort of portrait of a spectacularly beautiful and mysterious region, and again, that sort of tenuous relationship between man and nature, in this case man and predator, was really at the heart of that book. Now he's turned to fiction and to a border crossing story, a story that grabs you. I mean, they say this about books, but I can't think of a book for which it's more the case than this one. The old grabs you by the throat by about, I don't even know if it's page 3, it might be paragraph 3, and doesn't let you go. Really intense, really relentless, extraordinary first novel. Way to set the bar high, John Valiant. It grips you as much as any of his nonfiction has. And he's going to read, before we break into conversation, he's going to read a little bit from The Jaguar's Children. Please join me in welcoming John Valiant.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I also really would like to thank the city of Toronto. I've been here for 2 days, and I feel like I've just been basking in goodwill and positive regard. And I live a long way away, and this book is about a place that's even farther away. And so to be embraced in the way that I feel I have over the past 2 days is really thrilling and gratifying and extremely reassuring to me, because this is my first time out with this book. So Vancouver hasn't really seen it yet. So very, very proud to be here, and especially so because some dear friends are here, and maybe most important, the editor who backed me on this, pretty dubious proposition from the beginning, Louise Dennis. Thank you so much. So I'm going to read a little bit. We're just on page 21. It's a very dire circumstance. We're in a water truck that has broken down just north of the U.S.-Mexico border in the desert in Arizona. Inside this water truck are paying customers, paying coyotes to be escorted across the border quickly and safely. This truck is broken down. It's April 2007. There are 15 people in the truck. The narrator who is speaking to us, communicating to us through a cell phone, is named Hector. And his school friend with whom he's traveling is named Caesar, who has been badly injured and is now unconscious inside this truck, which is, of course, pitch dark. And there's no way out because it's a water truck that has been welded shut. Who else is in the truck are various people from southern Mexico. Hector's from Oaxaca, the second poorest state in Mexico in the deep south of the country. There are some people from Michoacan, a couple of tough guys, and a female baker. There's also two Nicaraguan gangsters and various other people. And so you'll be hearing a few different voices. And there's a certain amount of profanity. People are upset. So this is coming to you as a sound file recorded in Caesar's cell phone by Hector. It's hard to say this Annie Mac, and Annie Mac, I should say, is the handle of the American phone number that's in Caesar's phone, and Hector knows he's on the American side, and he's trying to send these messages to this mysterious Annie Mac person, who we assume is an American female, but we don't know. It is hard to say this Annie Mac, because I'm ashamed to be in such a situation, but what reason to hide it now? I must tell you so that somebody knows what happened to Caesar and all of us. Maybe you can find the people who did this. Luego, it happens like this. The truck is stopped, we don't know where, and Caesar is lying beside me somewhere between death and sleeping. Outside I can hear the coyotes talking to themselves. They are coyotes, so of course they're hard to understand, but it sounds like they're looking at the truck, trying to figure out what to do. I whisper once more that someone is hurt, but no one notices, because they're trying to hear the coyotes. So I feel Caesar's face again, and his forehead, and there's the cut, right on the line where the hair is growing, and it is pushed in a little bit, the skin and bone together. I open my water bottle and pour some drops on his forehead to wash the blood away, but it keeps coming. So with my phone, I look around for something to stop it, and that's when I see the little cotton dress sticking out of his jacket pocket, the one he bought for the Virgin Juquila when we were still in Oaxaca. The blood is coming fast, and there isn't time to think, so I put the dress on there and push on it. This is when I hear one of the coyotes climbing on the hood on top of the cab. There's a scraping noise at the front of the tank near the top, and then comes a blade of light so sharp we all cry out and cover our eyes. We're mostly grown men and women in there, but the way we hide and cover ourselves is like when your father comes at you with the belt. A moment comes and goes like this, and then carefully I look through my fingers. The light is still there, blinding, screaming in over our heads like the Annunciation, and I understand it is a flashlight coming through a small hole. Then a shadow comes across it, and I see only teeth. Amigos! ¿Qué tal? Says the shadow with its teeth. We have a little problem here. It is the front wheel. This is broken. Everything else is okay, but we must bring our mechanic to fix it. We tried many times to call, but he will not answer, so now we must go to find him. We're close, only 10 kilometers, so it won't take long. We'll bring back some water too, because maybe you're getting thirsty. When? Asked the man in front. Well, not until the night, because of Amiga. Well, how long is that? There's a moment. Another blade of light stabbing us, and then the shadow again. Well, not long, a few hours. A man in front with a Zapotec accent says, "What are you talking about? It's 6 in the morning. We can't wait here all day." "Cabron," says a coyote. "Be quiet. You'll make big problems for us and for you. El pinche Mira has powerful sensors all over the desert. They can hear everything you say. Oh yeah, we want to help you, but we're going to need some money to do it. We already paid our money," says the Zapotec man. "Yes, but that is different. Only for Don Serafin. It's untouchable. We're just the guides, amigo. And
Now we have this little problem. So we must work together to fix it. No? How much? Asked another man. He sounds old and tired, and I wonder if he's done this before. To buy the parts and pay the mechanic to come here, 500, says the coyote. 550 with the water. 550 pesos, says the Zapotec man. The coyote makes a disgusting noise and spits. No más pesitos. You're in America now, bro. And let us out, shouts the baker from Michoacan. Tranquilo, says the coyote. It isn't safe here, and we have no torch. There's a silence in the truck. The mechanic has one, but he won't take pesos. Solamente guardas gringos. Who has $550? Says the Zapotec man. If you want to get delivered, says the coyote, you do. A man is badly hurt, I say. We need some help in here. Outside, away from the truck, I hear the other coyote saying, Flaco, go get a esta. Let's get out of here. There's another silence because we're turning a corner now, and the Zapotec man whispers, does anyone have dollars? No one will answer, but the truth is most of us have some. But this is our only money for getting where we need to go on the other side. Without it, we're trapped. The older man says, well, how do we know you won't just take the money and leave us here? Then, very quiet, like he's sharing with us a special secret, the coyote says, you're my compa. What he says? He's ready to leave right now. I want to help you, amigo, but I don't have all day. We need to hurry if we're going to find the mechanic and get you out of here. The people talk between themselves. What do you think? Do we pay? Can we trust him? Well, what choice do we have? The older man is old enough to be the coyote's father, and he says to him, son, we paid so much already. Call Don Serafin and explain the situation. This was a mistake. Listen to my words, Senor Oaxaca. I'm not your fucking son. And Don Serafin doesn't give a fuck about you or me or this truck. My compa is walking away now, and all he's thinking about is cold beer and La Conchita. If you want, we can keep chatting until the Minutemen find us and burn the truck. Or if Migra finds you first, I'll kick your country asses right back over the border. Either way, you lose your money. I'm offering you a chance to make it. You have 1 minute. How can we know what's true and what isn't? So now people are taking their clothes off to get their secret money. I can hear seams ripping and the sound of Velcro. And because we're getting used to the light, it's embarrassing for the women. I have $40. My father sent me through the Western Union. It's in my sneaker, and to get it, I must move my hands from Caesar's head. I take off my sneaker and pass the money up to the front. After this, I pull out the shoelace and tie Huquila's dress to Caesar's head. I try to make the knot over the cut to make more pressure because the blood is still coming and there's a smell of metal more than all the rust in here. My hands are slippery with it. I wipe them on his jacket. The men in front are taking the money and pushing it through the slot. I can hear the coyote counting and then shouting, no more fucking pesos. But he doesn't give them back. He stops counting at 355. 200 más, he says. Pronto, pronto. We're moving fast and we're afraid and no one knows exactly how much money we've given already. When it's done, the men in front look back at us to see if there's more. I hold up my empty hands. Even in that thin light, I'm surprised how red they are. We look at each other and then the Zapotec man says, that's all we have. It's not enough, says the coyote. The older man claps his hands. For the love of God, we're not donating to the church here. Give it if you have it. This is difficult because no one wants to confess what they're holding back. The baby-faced man looks over at Caesar. He's about 25 with a goatee and lots of gel in his hair. What about him? He says. What about him? I say. It's money. We need it now. You're going to rob him? We're not robbing him. We're helping him. Everyone's watching and I don't know what to do, but I can't let them touch it. I'll look for it, I say. And I do this, go through Caesar's pockets, but there's nothing there, only some pesos in his busted. He's got money. Look at his shoes, says the baby-faced man. They're new ones. Pumas. And he pulls one off. "Don't touch him," I shout, and I kick his hands away. But he still has the shoe, shaking it and peeling out the inside. "Keep your hands off him." He throws the shoe back. "Maybe he took it already," says the baby-faced man's friend, looking at me when it was dark. "Fuck off," I say. "Maybe it's in his choice," says the baby-faced man. "Look at him," I say, and I put my phone screen by Caesar's face, which is still wet with the blood. "He has enough trouble already. Leave him alone." At that moment, the coyote hits the tank again with the metal thing, and it rings like a broken church bell, making everybody jump. "Ahora!" he shouts.
Thank you.
So, all right. Can everybody hear, are both our microphones working now? Yeah, okay, good. So I guess from what John said and what he read, you can, because we're going to assume tonight that most people here haven't read the book. You get the basic concept. We've got a group of people trapped in this water tanker truck that is broken down on the American side of the border, in Arizona. And the way the story is told is by this character Hector speaking into the cell phone as you just heard, and as John described, to every chapter, every bit of every word on the page is ultimately an expression of hope, because it is said into a phone in a sound file and hopefully going to somebody who may receive it and may be able to do something and may be able to help. So that's sort of the basics that you need to know, I think, for the purposes of the conversation tonight. Let's start with why Mexico and why the border? I know you have some history there. Tell us a little bit about how you came to know and have a sense so much of what goes on at the U.S.-Mexican border.
Being born and raised in the States, that the U.S.-Mexico border is one of several great American wounds, I guess, and it's sort of there, open and festering. And as someone from the Northeast, I was always fascinated by it and started exploring the border back in the 80s when I was pretty young. And I married a woman from Arizona, and so we'd go down and visit and did many trips across the border, along the border. I've camped out there on both sides, swam across the Rio Grande once into Mexico, and just had that fascination with that world. But on top of that, I think, kind of subconsciously and consciously nurturing that was my father's family's deep and complicated history with that country. And my great-grandfather went down there in 1890 off a farm in Indiana and said, "I'm done farming in Indiana," and went to Guatemala and then Mexico and became a very successful banker in Mexico City. He was a very wealthy man down there. And he raised a daughter, my grandmother, and they lived in very rarefied circumstances with a very rarefied crowd. And she went to the show where Frida Kahlo was in bed, among the paintings, and they knew Diego Rivera. And my grandfather came down there. He was studying archaeology at Harvard and came down and was introduced to my grandmother, and they were married down there, and he went on to become an authority on the Aztec civilization and wrote what was at the time the definitive book on the Aztecs, and it stayed in print for decades. And then he died very tragically in 1945. So I never met him, but I knew my grandmother, and she told us a lot about it. My father never wanted to go back because it was a very painful memory for him. And but we grew up in our family's houses surrounded by things from Mexico, even though we were in New England. And there were paintings of portraits of children, made by Diego Rivera that I looked at since I was a baby. since before I could speak, before I could conceptualize or have any sense of race or anything. And these were just parts of the family, and the furniture and the metalwork and old artifacts and all kinds of things. But my wife moved us to Oaxaca in 2009, and it was the first time I'd ever been to old Mexico and seen the Mexico that my grandparents and father might have seen.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about why you moved there in 2009 with your family.
Well, I was writing The Tiger, and deep in my little furry drama, and my wife Nora is a potter and an anthropologist, and she was doing most of the raising of our small children, who were at that time of 5 and 8, and I think she really thought, my soul is going to die if I keep doing this. I need to get out of here. And she single-handedly moved our family to Oaxaca because she wanted to study with indigenous artists and modern artists. And Oaxaca, the city of Oaxaca, which is the capital of the state of Oaxaca, is the Florence of Mexico. It is the art center. It's one of the most beautiful places you can go in the country. And artists from all over the world go there. And Nora was going to be another one. And we had no choice but to go along. And I was still, deep into The Tiger, and I was no help at all. And I carried suitcases, and that's pretty much what I did. And
So what was life like for you there? I mean, you were yourself a migrant, a temporary migrant there. What was that like for you? Sort of just what was the everyday, what kinds of things come to mind now when you recollect sort of what it was like to live in the poorest state in Mexico?
Waking up at 2 in the morning with by this time, this ear infection had been going about 5 weeks. Went to the doctor, and if you go to a Mexican doctor, they want to give you a big shot right in your ass, and that will cure everything. And so I'd had a couple of those, and it was not reaching my ears. And so I'm just in this sort of, we're living in this horrible cinder block house that's infested with vermin, and I got up, and it was about 2 in the morning, and I'm sitting at this desk with this computer that has no connection to anything, and worrying about money and what I'm going to do, and it's dark in there, and my feet are on the tile floor barefoot, and I feel this gentle pinching, probing on the end of my toe. And I look down, and there's this big scorpion that's just kind of sizing me up, It's like, well, I wonder if I can take this one down, And I smashed the daylights out of that thing with my shoe, and we moved out of there shortly after. And but it was, the cockroaches were so big. We had a fuse box, and in the switch, the breaker switch, you could see these guys crawling up to the crack, jacking their thorax or abdomen or whichever that part is out, about an inch, and then jamming themselves in there to get into the wiring to do whatever hideous things they had in mind. And it was tough. And the kids would not eat the food, and finding cream cheese in Oaxaca is a big drag. We didn't know how to take the bus or pay the water bill. And honestly, it gave me a lot more empathy for the many new Canadians who are struggling to figure out how the hell this place works. And Mexico was a big puzzle, and we were there by choice.
How was your Spanish? And I ask partly because you, as you could hear, even just in that small reading, but through the whole book, it's so peppered with Spanish, and even just vernacular, like the word coyote. You said that to us, as though everybody would know what that is. I know that now, but the idea of the coyote being the person who's going to help you get illegally across the border, like all the lingo that is that all picked up from there? Did you acquire did you learn Spanish?
I think I learned more than I might give myself credit for, but I think of myself as a terrible Spanish speaker and with lousy comprehension. And but I got around. There weren't people speaking English for us. We had some expat friends who were helpful, but we did our own trips and figured it out. I worked really, I ran this by a lot of Mexican people to make sure that I had the particular epithets, just so. But so this has been checked out by people who really know what they're talking about.
It comes off so the real deal. I thought, whoa. And then when I heard you'd been in Mexico, I thought, oh, he's one of those people that just is the multi-linguist and he flows effortlessly between. So you fooled us. I'm curious, as a journalist, you
Now you've outed me, thanks. Really great, we're off to a good start.
The journalist in you that saw your first two books, saw the story there, saw the issue that you wanted to get at, that you wanted to tell through words. What did the journalist in Mexico, what did that part of you see and feel that need to tackle, the need to tell those? What stories did you feel you needed to tell?
The first thing the journalist wanted to do was to send off his manuscript of The Tiger and never see it again, and lie in a hammock and read books that didn't have tigers in them. And that really is what the journalist wanted to do. I really saw this as a sort of recovery time. And Nora, my wife, had this thing she wanted to do, and I would be, I would drive the kids or take the kids to and from school, and she would do, her thing. And that's what.
Looking for cream cheese.
Yeah, I found the cream cheese. I brought home the cream cheese, and but she would go on these field trips to these very remote villages where she was mostly Zapotec people. There's 16 tribes down there. There are 100 dialects. It's a really very vivid and varied place. And we would go into these pueblos where grandmothers wouldn't speak any Spanish despite 500 years of conquest. And they were making pots the way they'd made them 1,000 years ago. And there were oxen and mud walls, and it's just a different world. And it was fascinating to me. And so initially I was kind of a passenger. And then you start talking to people, and so here are people living like they did 100 years ago or 500 years ago, but there's the son who's got the truck. And how did you get the truck? Well, I went up to the States. Then I found out 1 in 3 Oaxacanos goes up to the States to work. And in the past 15 years, that's become an increasingly dangerous proposition between drug cartels controlling the coyote business on the border and also the feds and hostile attitudes on the other side. So how are they getting up there? What's happening to them? And so I started to see the real cost, because you'd go into other villages and all the people of working age were gone. And there'd be the grandparents and the kids and the animals in these half-built cement houses that were being built on remittances sent by people who may never live in those houses. And it was very weird, and it was like this selective plague had come through, and it was a kind of economic plague that was afflicting these communities. Whereas 15 years ago, that sun would go up for 3 months and come back, but it's not easy to do that. You can't do that routine seasonal round anymore. So that's what I was seeing.
Because of the change in the way the border is.
Who's controlling it? Yeah.
By the drug cartels and stuff.
Yeah. And so the death toll, even though fewer people are immigrating now, the number of people dying in the desert is growing. It's backwards. And so that was disturbing, and you develop relationships. These people are inviting you into your homes, and they're feeding you. They're sending you home with piles of food, because that's what you do, even though, we certainly didn't need any food, but it's just how you are with your guests. And it's very hard not to be, moved and humbled by that. And so, just more things started happening. There were a number of things I saw that, were just very upsetting.
Were you taking notes? Were you thinking that there were stories here, or just were you accumulating these things more inside?
Mostly internal, but there was a story about a glowing jaguar, a real jaguar, that had been captured by some people, and I was trying to follow that story, and I could not get close enough to it. So abandoned that, and really was just, again, kind of soaking it in, and I was just blown out from doing the Tiger. And so I really was a passenger for a long time, until I got this.
Yeah, I wanted to tell the story of, I guess first of all, I want to ask you about that shift between nonfiction to fiction, and maybe, let me ask you that first. Did you know that you next wanted to write fiction? Like, did you know that fiction was something you wanted to experiment with, or did it come to you by surprise?
I think probably a lot of nonfiction writers feel this way. the novel is, to me, feels like the ultimate long-form narrative expression. And, you know, that was sort of the mountain that was waiting. And I had to try to do it at some point. And had another one that I'd been working on, and then the tiger came along. And then, but I had not thought about writing a novel about Mexico until, you know, around January. You know, we've been there about 4 or 5 months, and then a couple of things happened.
Tell the story of this sort of, you call it the visitation.
Yeah, I really felt that way. I vowed not to read any more books with tigers in them, and then my father-in-law left The White Tiger, which won the Booker in 2008, really wonderful short book. There wasn't a lot of English stuff to read there, so I read that, and I thought, wow, this sounds a lot like Mexico, you know. Poor people from hidebound indigenous villages wondering what's going on in the big city and trying to leverage themselves out. And I thought, I wonder if anyone's written anything, you know, and obviously people have written about Mexicans trying to make that journey, but that was kind of percolating away in there. And then I was sitting at the computer doing some final thing with the tiger, and very clearly the first lines of this book came to me, which are, I'm sorry to bother you, but I need some assistance. And I don't hear voices. You know, I'm a very fact-based, literal guy, and the reporting I do is with real people or from, you know, recordings. And so I heard this, and it was so clear. And so I thought, well, this is interesting. I'll write it down. And very, very rapidly after that, it was clear this was a young man. He was texting through a phone. He was trapped in a water truck, of which I'd seen many driving around the city of Oaxaca and wondered about their smuggling possibilities.
This is all coming to you just
In that moment.
It's all clear, all those details are becoming clear to you.
Well, it's because that all the seeds had been planted. You know, the water trucks had been planted, people being smuggled across the border. It was a theme, it was an issue there. And it was clear his name was Hector. It was clear he was trapped inside this water truck, and he was trying to get out. He was trying to get help from somebody. And so I, you know, became the conduit for that. And it was sort of loud enough and weird enough that I, you know, paid attention to.
And what was the process like? How would you compare the difference in the writing process of writing?
Well, one, you're following somebody else's thread, and you can't really make a move until you find the next stepping stone, a factual stepping stone that enables you to go further into the story. So you meet one person, they tell you all they can. Who do you know who knows more about what happened over there? And then you go to them, and that's your next stepping stone, and you're building this pathway into the story. Whereas fiction is more of a guided hallucination or maybe lucid dreaming. And so you're kind of nudging it along, but it's also telling you, and you know, if there are fiction writers in the audience, maybe you know some of what this is like, and especially if it's new to you, and I wasn't trying to do a formulaic thing. I didn't know what was happening. And I'm not going to get too magical about it, because I thought of real things that were happening. I thought, well, you know, could I put this in the story? You know, because I had seen so much of Oaxaca at that point, all these details and things that I was really struck by. And this was a way, basically what it comes down to is the novel was a better container for everything that I was seeing and learning and feeling. And then it was energized by Hector. And so he became the vehicle through which all these perceptions could flow.
And what makes it a better container than a nonfiction book about, you know, a migration story?
It's infused by all the psychic baggage that you bring to it. And that gives it this extra neurotic zing, you know. And I think that's really what it is. It's a sort of this three-way collaboration between your characters and you and the story. And so, you know, you're in there too in a way that you can't be in nonfiction unless you're doing sort of a memoir and you know, this is what I did. And those are fascinating too, but this is, there's a strange synergistic chemistry that happens. And it somehow, I felt like this book is able to be much more emotionally nuanced and authentic than
I was able to articulate other people's emotions in nonfiction books, but it's not as personal and messy and close to the bone.
I read that you sort of secretly feel like a charlatan because you haven't read all of Faulkner and you haven't read Ulysses and you haven't read, for somebody which I'm curious to ask you about, the confidence to write fiction when you sort of feel that way to a degree. But not only that, but to write a character so, and a set of experiences so short of the 10 months that you lived in Oaxaca, like so different from your experiences as a white middle-class North American. Did it feel brave to you to be taking that steps? Did you have those crises of confidence? You said that in the Globe and Mail this earlier this year, talking about, your New Year's resolutions, I think. So I guess I better read some of these books because I always felt a little fraudulent having not read them as a fiction writer. So I was curious about that.
I'm a really slow reader and feel very poorly read. And at the same time, for some reason, I have enough ego and enough of that pathological compulsion to communicate whatever story it is, to write and to enjoy and be energized by hours and hours and hours by yourself. It's a very weird thing to do and be, I think, and it's really not for everybody. So there's just that. I'm not sure it's courage. It's just more compulsion. But at the same time, and also to say, okay, I'm going to impersonate a 22-year-old Zapotec man. That's stupid, really, and at the very least, presumptuous. And but I really thought I could do it, and I think I have. And at least this guy, that's the beauty of fiction, is he doesn't have to be completely authentic. He can be an individual. He's himself. So he's got a lot of me in him, but with all these Zapotec fingerprints. And so he's struggling with the same feelings. And what do you do when the governor of your state, who has ordered the killings of people you know and robbed the state blind, is suddenly sitting behind you? You discover that he's sitting behind you in a cafe with his elbow rubbing yours. What do you do with that feeling? And I found myself in that situation one day in the cafe on the Zocalo in Oaxaca. And I turned around and here is this guy who should be in prison at the very least. And there are, asesino is spray painted all over the city, assassin, with pictures of this man who's touching you right now. And what do you do with that? And here, and I felt like, I felt so conflicted. Everyone knows he's there, and his bodyguards are there, and everyone's acting like it's all normal and everything's fine, and the city was wrecked after the strikes of 2006, which were, the result of people's hatred of this man. And there he is. He suppressed the strike. Everything's sort of back to normal, but their tourists have all been scared away by the violence. And so here he is. So do I turn around and call him what he is? Do I kill him, which is probably what he deserves? Or do I sit there like a little coward and just drink my beer and everyone else is having that same dilemma? And it was a very, very uncomfortable place to be, and I didn't really know what to do with that feeling, but Hector could have that experience. And, it's, I know that it's not just my feeling, Hector's going to have, it's within the spectrum of possibility for him to have a feeling like that.
Issues like that, political injustice, you get into, not giving a lot away, but you get into the idea of genetically modified foods, specifically corn, crops in Mexico, industrialization of agriculture. There's some some political issues that you get to go at in, again, through fiction. I'm curious what how and why you wanted to include those aspects in your story, and how different it is to tackle an issue and make a point about things, how different that is through fiction than the way you've done it in books before.
Well, GMO corn is a really important subject, and it's one that I would never touch with a 10-foot pole, because it just seems so deadly, you know, and to say, oh, I wrote this novel, and it's about GMO corn, and I can see people fleeing, you know, and I did not choose that subject. Oaxaca is the birthplace of corn, and that's where it was, you know, essentially genetically modified bread starting around 6,000 or 7,000 years ago, and the corn we have today came out of that part of Central America. And so for people who live in the Sierra Juarez, they are corn people going back for millennia. And this other guy who's in with Caesar is, with Hector, his older friend who he really admires, was this very brilliant student who was sent up to UNAM, the big university, and because he knows about corn and he's very, very bright, he got into biogenetics program. So now he's learning how to break corn down. He already kind of knew at the spiritual level from his parents, and now he's learning how to actually do it at the molecular level, at the DNA level. And, you know, these were his issues, and this is the reason he is fleeing across the borders, because he knows things about this particular big company's plans for Oaxacan corn that company does not want public. So these are things that just sort of, you know, they grew organically out of the story. And what I'm terrified of, frankly, is people saying, oh, GMO corn, you know, Valiant's got some, you know, eco-axe to grind. You know, what a drag, you know, and I would have to agree, you know, and all I can say is that it wasn't my idea.
We just have a couple minutes left before we open the floor for other questions, but and without giving any, I'm going to be very careful not to give anything away, because, you know, you already are all dying to know what happens to the people in the truck. That's the beauty, the brilliance of this book. And I will say that the ending is a masterful stroke of genius that I, for one, never saw coming. Never saw it coming. I was going to ask you at what point did you know how you would end this as you're writing about this like extraordinary? I also wondered, like, was it just exhausting to write such intense stuff?
Well, I didn't know what was going to happen to Hector. I didn't know what was going to happen for a long time, you know, if he was going to make it out or not. And when I solved that piece of the puzzle, I was extremely pleased with myself, and also very relieved. And but being in that place, it really is, folks, a metaphor for the writing process. You're locked in a room, you're sending messages out, and if they don't get out, you're going to die. That's basically what it is.
I had a conversation recently with Miriam Caves, who is so, you know, beloved for her fiction writing, and she said she's thinking about, she wasn't, you know, making any commitments, but she's really drawn to, she said she kind of wants to get out of her own head and write some nonfiction. And I wondered now that you've experienced both, do you have a feeling of, you have a preference? Do you have a sense of what you want to do next? Do you have a pull anywhere that you can share?
Well, I'm going to see how this one goes over. And then part of me feels like novel writing is a very frivolous proposition. And given the state of the world today, that causes problems for me. And I feel okay about this, but I really love nonfiction, but at the same time, you know, after I wrote The Golden Spruce, I really despaired of ever finding another story that had all the ingredients that that story had, that made it, for me, the story of a lifetime. It had all these different things that were exciting to me, and it was a story that could be read biologically, historically, mythically, sociologically. You know, you could read it all these different ways, and they were all true. And The Tiger had that. I was amazed that I would get another story like that had that kind of complexity and tremendous narrative drive. And you know, those are really rare experiences, and we aren't entitled to them. You know, I really feel like those kinds of stories are like true love, and you're really lucky to get it, and you're smart if you recognize it. And but I don't know where another nonfiction like that is going to come from. You know, my antennae are up, I'm wide open, but I don't know. You know, they're really, so I don't know what the future really looks like. I have that other novel that I started before The Tiger, but it's historical, and I don't really know if I can justify the time.
So we'll have to wait and see. Well, I could chat away here with John all night long, but I feel I should share. So if anybody has any questions, the microphone is in the center of the aisleway here. So you come up, and that way people in the audience will hear you, and people on the recordings listening.
Hello. First of all, yeah, thanks for coming. It's great to hear you talk. I'm a big fan of all three books. I guess my question is, when you were down in Juarez, living, working there, what reception did you get? I'm sure you got positive and negative from people who live there, locals, about a gringo, an American, writing about their story. Did you get any adverse reactions from people?
Well, they didn't know that I was planning to write a story, and I barely knew, you know, for a while. But as far as the reception, what I was really moved by is, you know, everybody assumed we were American down there, and many of their family members, if not them too, had been to the States. All kinds of things had happened. You know, I was speaking to one guy, he was up there 3 months and spent the next 5 years in prison, and then was sent home. And I don't know what he was up to, but he learned pretty good English, and in jail. And yet, so here we are down there, and people were so kind and open to us. And maybe it's because we had kids, and it's a family-centered culture, you know, at 2 levels. And so we made sense to them, and we were kind of a legitimate unit. But I felt, you know, at the very worst, kind of maybe a bit of diffidence and cautious curiosity, but mostly real warmth and welcome. And but they were also really happy to talk about what their experiences were, insofar as I was able to in Spanish, which I wasn't that able to. So I was really it was more of a kind of osmotic soaking in, and that whole notion of actually, you know, I'm going to write about this, you know, really, you know, came much firmer later. You know, that first, you know, very beginning of the novel was more just a kind of cautious exploration that had no real end. So.
Thank you. Hello. Thanks for doing this. I guess I was just wondering, not just pertaining to this particular book, since it's fiction, but also with regards to your previous 2 books, did you have any influences, literary influences, or otherwise, in terms of tackling the sort of the collision between man and nature and that kind of thing? Thank you.
I've been getting beaten up by Moby Dick since I was 13 years old, and it's a totemic book for me. And it sounds kind of stereotypical, but you know, I'm from New England and spent a lot of time on the coast in those islands and in those places, and it's just a very vivid story for me. And you know, Peter Matheson, Barry Lopez. Really amazing book that is in some ways central to this is Leslie Marmon Silko's Ceremony, wonderful novel writer. And that I read when I was about 19, and that was one of the first books I read that I think made me want to someday write something where story was so front and center. But this book also, another book I got into really young was The Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. And really that's what this is. You know, he's 22 instead of an old man, and it's not a wedding, it's a cell phone, but he's still grabbing you by the collar and saying, I gotta tell you. I have it. And so that's, you know, that was in my mind a lot.
You talk a lot about, and you show a lot of the ways in which humans have, what we've done with the natural world and the natural order, and how civilizations have evolved. You managed to sort of imply and comment on a lot of that. And here, as I said earlier, the vehicle for telling this whole story is, you know, a piece of modern technology. I wondered what your thoughts, if that was I know it's a necessary tool for telling the story, but did you think about that at all? About the you know, it's not necessarily ironic, but just the placement of that, you know, piece of human advancement into this story that's a bit of a commentary on that, what do you think?
Since the first lines came to me as text messages, it just seemed like, well, this is the vehicle, for better or worse, and then how do you're trapped inside a truck. It was sort of a technical, mechanical narrative problem. He's inside the truck, so are we just going to be in his head and hear the story? And I really liked the, you know, the letter writing idea, you know, that like you know, Ned Kelly, The True History of Ned Kelly, by Peter Carey, I think who's coming here, and you know, there are a number of wonderful books that have been written in that form, but obviously no one's writing letters. So this came through these written, spoken records. But the other thing that's interesting about Mexico right now is they're at this amazing historical moment where people are using 1,000-year-old technology, and also their grandchildren know all about SpongeBob and are quite interested in Halo 4 and are very versatile on a cell phone. Then they can go home back to their village, do the Jaguar dance, and know just how to plant the corn and squash beans. And it's maybe a once in an epic moment. And so you know, the phone was in a way a good device for that, but it wasn't conscious. You know, it wasn't, oh, this is a cool device. You know, it's how it was presented. Cell phones are really common in Mexico because no one has a house phone. So everyone leapt over that generation of technology.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. There was something you said a moment earlier about reading something that made you think, oh, maybe one day I will write. And speaking to the process of writing, I wonder now at this stage in your life, how much of your writing is that you want to tell or that you need to tell?
I think it's neat. You know, I delayed writing I didn't start writing professionally until I was 35. And I spent, you know, a dozen very restless, rather tormented years trying to do other things that were clearly the wrong thing for me to be doing. And they were informative. But once I started writing at 35, it was so clear that this is what I was made to do. You know, I was good at it. I could think of nothing else. You know, I had endless time for the placement of a comma, you know, and I loved research, you know, loved sitting in the empty room with the empty page. You know, a lot of people talk about, you know, the writer's anguish, and, you know, if that is what it is for you, maybe, you know, maybe that's not the thing to do, but, you know, the editing kills me. But the writing is really, really often quite joyful.
And if you'll indulge me, one more question then on that note. With the need to tell or to speak your truth, be it in fact or fiction or the combination of them, do you need to weigh what the personal expense will be for you to speak your truth? This being a topic, I mean, the American-Mexican border, environmentalism on the West Coast, the things that you've chosen about are not light subjects. They are, in some arenas, very contentious. And I wonder if, I mean, you mentioned the word earlier about having the courage to do what you do. There's different prices to be paid for speaking our truth, be it whatever way you choose to do it. How much of that factors into how you write and how much you're willing to pay to do
Yeah. Well, I don't think I'm quite brave enough, but I do feel that how we negotiate, how humans negotiate their relationship with the natural world is the story of our time and will define everything that comes next. And so I can't think of anything more important or pressing or urgent to write about or to try to understand and grapple with in as brave a way as you can summon yourself to do. And so that's what it comes naturally. It's not I'm going to write about logging or I'm going to write about animal conservation. It's all narrative driven. I'm drawn to but I'm drawn to the conflict. And there's a kind of vibrancy and energy coming off that. There's that sort of tectonic potential, and I feel like we're in such a moment. And so these are different ways of responding to that tension.
What do you think is, I had a conversation the other day, interviewed on the radio, Naomi Klein and Avi Lewis, about him making a documentary about her book, This Changes Everything, about climate change. And we were sort of talking about I'll ask you the same thing. What is the power of art to affect change? I mean, there are, we talked a lot this week about the power of protest and of going to the streets and the power in the choice of how you approach an issue or a crisis. So what is the power of using art to get at an issue?
Well, this is, I think, why nonfiction writers are jealous of fiction writers is it's sort of they're able, I mean, there are nonfiction books, obviously, that have changed history and moved, started movements or caused them to coalesce, but there's something about the way fiction kind of creeps, under your skin and into your tissue and touches you emotionally, that it's just a different, I think they're both art in a way, and this is a really thorny subject that I don't quite feel capable of resolving, but they are different. And
does art have the power to affect change?
Yeah, of course. Well, I guess we've been seeing some weird, perverted version of it in France over the past few days. I feel like I need to give you a concrete example. I think what it really comes, I'm going to back out of this and say that it's about narrative and it's about stories, and that's what we're hardwired to do, and that's the language that we communicate through. And so the story might be, even through an advertisement or through a beautiful novel or through a film, but it's, if we resonate to the story and it is tapped into the zeitgeist tightly enough, then I think it will move us in that direction. It's more like a nudging device. But I think the public, the hearer, the receiver of that story has to be already teetering one way or the other. And then they get this push, and maybe it's Rachel Carson with Silent Spring, or so, there are many examples, but it's a big one.
You alluded earlier to the sense that you had that the story drove the writer. It possesses the writer. And you also said, I felt that I had to tell the story through Hector. So Hector is driving the story. Have you ever been in a situation in which you started being driven by one character's story and finding partway through the novel that there's another character who is interfering with that story and wants to take over?
I've heard that's common among novelists, and as a first-timer, I haven't had enough experience to have that experience. But I hear it's common. You know, people start, and then these other characters come up, and you know, Caesar becomes strong in the end, but stronger as things go on. But hasn't happened really to me.
He's the only one with a cell phone.
Well, yeah, but I've heard it's heard it happen.
Thank you all for being here and for being such good listeners. I know you're going to love this book for anyone who hasn't read it yet. If you want to pick up a copy, John will be kindly signing them all in somewhere towards the back of the room. In the meantime, I think visitors are warm welcome.